I'd like to welcome you to BibleMesh Biblical Languages' first webinar on success in studying biblical languages. My name is Timothy Edwards and I'm the Hebrew editor for the BibleMesh Biblical Language program. And this webinar will last about 30 minutes. I'll give a presentation for about 25 minutes, and if during that time you have questions related to the content of the presentation, you can type those questions into the webinar control panel that you have on your screen, and Brian Pinney, who's organizing the webinar, will sort of gather those questions together and send a couple on to me towards the end of the webinar, and I'll see if I can answer them for you. I would like to just say that there's a diverse group of people who've joined us on the webinar. Some of you are right at the beginning stages of your language learning. You're learning the alphabet and vowels. Others of you are at the further on in your language learning. Some of you are coming to the end of level 2 of a reading course. Some of you are studying Greek, some of you are studying Hebrew. And so the content of the webinar will be general in how to best succeed in studying biblical languages. And it will focus on particularly the reading courses for BibleMesh. For those of you who are just at that beginning stage in First Steps Immerse, I would encourage you that sometimes that is the hardest stage to be in, because you're just learning the script, you're learning vowels. It's not too exciting. We would encourage you to learn that as intensively as possible and get onto the reading courses as quickly as possible. We don't want to get stuck at that early stage. Okay, I'm going to turn off my webcam now and we'll start the presentation. So the presentation is on success in studying biblical languages. And the question, that's not working. There. I apologize for this. My computer just went very strange on me. There we go. We're back at the beginning. That was strange. So, success in studying biblical languages. It's an important question. When you set out on any task, you need to have a goal in mind in order to get there. So the question is, what do we understand by success when it comes to learning a biblical language? If you don't know where you're going, it's hard to get there. And for those of us who have designed the BibleMesh Biblical Languages program, we have a particular goal in mind for our students, and it's good for you to know that. So what do we understand by success? And I've defined it here as an independent engagement with the biblical text. Now, let's emphasize the idea of independent here. Often people are reading a biblical text in the original language and they are dependent upon particular tools or programs. So every second, third, fourth word they have to look up in lexicons or using their computer program. They have to be consulting tables to identify verb forms or noun forms. And we want people to be engaging with the biblical text independently, not relying on those tools excessively. Now, what do I mean by engagement with the biblical text? Well, firstly, and the obvious one is reading comprehension. Our goal and your goal should be to be able to pick up either the Greek New Testament or the Hebrew Bible and read in the original language freely, understanding most of the words that you encounter. You are not constantly referring to lexical tools, just as you would in many ways with your mother tongue. In a book with your mother tongue, you get up and you read and you enjoy it. And so our aim is, at the end of the reading courses, for students to be able to pick up a Hebrew Bible and turn to any narrative section or a Greek New Testament and be able to turn to any page and enjoy reading it and understand it. So you're reading independently of all those lexical aids. Secondly, we want to have people have good listening comprehension. We sometimes forget in our modern era that engagement with the biblical text for the majority of history has been oral and not just reading. Before the invention of the printing press, most people's interaction with the biblical text will be through hearing it. And it's an important component of language learning. Our aim is for students to be able to, without necessarily seeing the text, but by hearing it read in Greek or Hebrew, to be able to understand what is being said. Now, that understanding may not be as comprehensive as when you read the text, but still it's an important skill in language learning. And so our aim is to have your listening comprehension to be very good. And the third aspect of success in learning biblical language is reading ability. By that, we mean when you pick up either a Hebrew text or a Greek text, you can read it out loud, accurately, and confidently. Okay, this is sometimes a part of language learning that is not focused on, but it helps in your grasp of the language to be able to read out loud confidently and well. And so BibleMesh, this is three aspects of what we would describe as successful language learning. And this is our aim. At the end of the 4 reading courses, your reading comprehension, your listening comprehension, and your reading ability are at a high level. And you're not constantly referring to the aids that often you become dependent upon. So we've defined what we understand by success in studying biblical languages. The question is, how do I achieve that success? It's a high goal to have that definition of success. But how do I achieve that success? Well, time is, in one sense, the simple answer. You have to give it time. Language learning doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen by osmosis, just by living around a language. You need to commit time to it. And so for that to happen, a student needs to make it a priority. And we have many priorities that, in our lives, but if you're going to learn biblical languages, you're going to experience success in learning a biblical language. You need to make it a priority. You also need to make a plan. It's not going to happen by accident. So you need to set aside time each day, whether it's morning, afternoon, or both. So you have to make it a priority. You have to make it a plan. And the last one is you have to be motivated. And this is by defining success at the beginning of the webinar is important, because having a vision of where you want to get is very important. That is what motivates you to study. And when the going gets difficult, when you have to learn another verb table and you think you're finding it hard, that motivation comes from having that goal in mind. So we've defined what success is. We've seen how we achieve that success. The question is, now we want to spend the majority of our time, and is how to use BibleMesh to achieve such success. Okay, you're all studying on BibleMesh in different courses and at different levels. So how are we going to best use BibleMesh for that to achieve that success? Well, firstly, let's look at the reading comprehension. Firstly, the first 3 steps of every lesson in the reading course are very important, even though you're not actually tested on the translation that you produce. For those of you who are in Immerse, the first 3 steps of a reading course are listening to a biblical text, then learning the vocabulary for that text, and then having to translate it with the help of a reading guide. And those first 3 steps are very important. Every lesson we want you to be engaging with the text, learning how language works, experiencing the grammar in its context. So the first 3 steps of every lesson are very important, even though you may not be tested on them. You need to take them very seriously. And so we encourage you to spend a lot of time on those first 3 steps. Secondly, don't skip learning the vocab. Now, it sounds like every language teacher's refrain on the importance of learning vocabulary. Now, I know it's a fantastic tool that we have that helps you learn the vocabulary, and that helps you to retain the learning of that vocabulary. And as most of you experienced, it tests you in those 4 different ways. English to Hebrew, Hebrew to English, and then hearing it in Hebrew or Greek and finding the English, and then typing in Hebrew or Greek. And it can take a long time to master the vocab for each particular lesson. And we'd encourage you not to skip that stage, not to do it quickly and get out of the way in order to move on to learn the grammar. It's there for a reason. The larger your vocabulary is, the easier your reading comprehension is. So we want you to give good time to learning the vocabulary and reviewing it constantly. Okay. The next thing I want to stress in reading comprehension, trying to achieve that independent reading of the biblical text, is to read carefully the examples from the biblical text in the grammar articles that you encounter. So when we've gone through the first 3 steps, you've translated a verse or 2 verses, you're then introduced to a grammar topic from that verse. And that article will often have examples from other passages in either the Greek New Testament or the Hebrew Old Testament. And sometimes it will be tempting just to skip over those examples because you're understanding what's going on. You've seen the important video at the beginning of the article. You think, I know what's going on. But again, seeing the grammar topic in a different context with different words is very important. Again, it's all the time, it's increasing your ability to engage with the biblical text. We want you to be saturated in Scripture as you study Hebrew or Greek, and the examples in the grammar articles are part of that, and they help you to engage with grammar in different contexts, not just the context you have translated from the set text, but also from other passages of the Bible. Next, we have the typing in Hebrew and Greek that we make you do in the assessment exercises. Now, this is a hard skill to learn because you have the frustration of learning a new keyboard and all the frustrations that coincide with that. But by typing in Hebrew and Greek, you're making your knowledge of the grammar and the language active rather than passive. Now, although it's a lot harder, in the long run, your understanding of how the language works will be improved no end. And so we have a lot of emphasis on creating Hebrew forms or creating Greek forms. And we want you to really work hard at that skill. That is only going to increase your reading comprehension if you yourself can translate from English into Hebrew or English into Greek, or create forms that you're required. That was a staple part of any classical education in the classical languages, and it was for a reason, because it enables you to understand the language a lot better. What about listening comprehension? We've talked about that as an aim for success, and we've defined success as having a good listening comprehension. Well, we have all the biblical text recorded, and you have the option of listening to the biblical text many, many times. So each unit that you study in the reading course is recorded. And again, it's tempting to skip over listening to that recording. It doesn't seem necessarily to apply too much to the lesson structure, and you're not going to be tested on whether you understand the audio recordings or not. But it's an important element in language learning. So we want you to listen to the unit overview recordings more than once. It's part of getting scripture into you, and you're starting to get the language and the flow of the language and how to listen to the language embedded in you. Now you can listen to it while following the text on the screen, and sometimes it will be good to close your eyes and not look at the text and listen to see how many words you can pick up. And by doing that, you're starting to, again, you're learning, but not through visual means, but through audio means. You're hearing the text, and it increases your listening comprehension. Once you've done the 4 verses together, or 5 verses of the unit, each step of the next 3, each part of the next 3 steps has the audio recording of the single verse. Again, keep listening to it. Okay, keep listening. It gets the scriptures inside of you, and you're starting to hear the forms that are contained within the verse or verses that you're studying. So we really need, and want you to listen to the text. What about reading ability? That is the third aspect of what we define success in studying biblical languages as. How do we improve our reading ability? Oh, in an online course, you're not sitting with a teacher who listens to you read and corrects where you make mistakes. However, you do have the audio recordings that you've been listening to. These are beautifully read and pronounced. And so we would encourage you to not only listen to those recordings, but you read the text that they're reading both before and after listening to the audio recording, and be disciplined in doing this. Not only be disciplined on doing it, but also you can record yourself, and then you can listen to both recordings and see where you made mistakes. Now, when you make mistakes in reading, sometimes that can show you some misunderstanding that you have in the language itself. You've assumed it's one form, or assumed one form works one way, when actually it works in a different way. And so it's another way of learning the language and getting the language inside of you. So reading aloud before and after listening to the audio recordings is very important. And then the last aspect of reading ability, which is again the typing in Hebrew or Greek. And use Hebrew as an example. If you, in creating a form in Hebrew, leave out a dagesh at the beginning of a word or in the middle of a word, that changes the pronunciation. It shows you your misunderstanding how that word works. And so your reading ability is going to be increased by recognizing the dagesh, where it comes, and how it works. And so your typing in Hebrew and Greek will increase your reading ability. No way. And so you can see that the reading courses that we have developed at BibleMesh are focused on these 3 aspects of what we describe as success in learning biblical languages. We have the reading comprehension, we have the listening comprehension, and we have the reading ability. And so those are the 3 aspects of success which we really focus in on in the reading courses. Let me just take a moment to take a step back and perhaps address the students who are still in first steps for learning the alphabet. You're taking your first steps in the course. And a lot of what I've said about reading comprehension, listening comprehension, and reading ability seem a long way off? Well, it's important to lay those foundations and to lay them as quickly as possible. Sometimes, and we've seen this in the usage of BibleMesh, some people take a long time to do that First Steps Immerse course. And the longer it takes you to do it, and once it's the slower your learning will become. You want to do that as intensively as possible, which I've encouraged right at the beginning. Get the alphabet and the vowels down as quickly as you can, and have these 3 goals in mind as you start your language learning, because it will affect the way you study. Your goal is to be able to read the text well, and so as you do those first steps, what seem like minute rules sometimes, particularly in the Hebrew, suddenly make a lot more sense. When we get you to practice your reading, and early on, when it's very hard, again, that is all part of achieving the goal that you have at the end. So you have your reading comprehension, listening comprehension, reading ability, even right in the First Steps course. That is where we're trying to get you, okay, in order for you to achieve success in studying biblical languages. And finally, I should say 1 or 2 things about assessment before I answer any questions that any people may have. If you do have them, begin typing them in now so we can organize them. We assess at every stage in the biblical language course, whether it's Immerse First Steps or whether it's in the reading course. And those assessments are difficult. Every verse quiz, every unit test, you have maybe up to 20% of the questions or mark is typing in Hebrew and Greek. And the unit tests are difficult. You have to get it first time. That's what your grade is based on. Why do we put such an emphasis on assessment? Well, it's because we want you to become the independent readers, listeners of the biblical text. And that won't happen unless you really know the grammar. And so we're rigorous in teaching the grammar and testing you on that grammar. All the assessments have been devised to make sure you've learnt the content of the articles as thoroughly as possible. And so the assessment is a central part of your learning experience. I emphasize the listening, I emphasize the reading, I emphasize the translation, none of which is assessed. But the assessment will enable you to get to that point of independence in your reading and listening of the biblical text. So you need to take those seriously. Even if you're not doing it for credit or part of a recognized course with institutions that we're partnered with or will partner with in the future, it's an important part of your learning. So often, if your aspirations are low, then you achieve those aspirations often. Okay, but we want your aspirations to be high. We define success in learning the biblical language at a very high level, and the assessment is key to that. So really work hard on that assessment. And if you make a mess of one of the tests, then go back and do it again. Be diligent. In the verse quizzes, we don't provide you with the correct answers if you get it wrong. The reason being, we're saying that shows that you haven't understood something. You need to go back and learn it again. Okay? And it's very easy. You say, no, I'll just go on to the next one. I don't mind. 4 out of 5 is okay. 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 is not too bad. If you've made a mistake in the verse quizzes, make the effort to go back and see where you've made that mistake, and then go through that verse quiz again in order to get it right the next time. So take the assessment seriously. The same with the unit tests and the exams. They're all part and parcel of the road that we're taking on in order to be independent readers and listeners of the biblical text. So that's how we define success in BibleMesh. That's how we think you can get there. And if there are no questions, then, which I can't see there being any questions at the moment, then we will close the webinar. So if there are no questions, if no one's typing, then we will finish the webinar there. Okay, I don't see any coming in, so thank you for joining us. We hope to put more of these webinars on in the future, looking at different topics within language learning, perhaps having guest presenters to discuss issues with. So keep an eye out in future. We'll let you know when more webinars are put on, and hopefully we'll see you again. You will have a short questionnaire afterwards about the helpfulness of the webinar. Please do fill that in. That will help us a lot as we plan future webinars, as we help you achieve success in studying biblical languages with BibleMesh. So thank you very much for joining us.